It's good to see those of you that I can see, and great to be talking about flying and doing Coast Guard missions. There hasn't been a lot of that in my life lately, but it made me realize that we needed to put some effort into keeping our skills up and maybe getting ourselves a little bit more squared away than we would be if we just waited for this all to flush on through the system until we got back to work. So the impetus for wanting to do this tonight really came from a case we had here 10 days ago, and we'll be talking about that a little bit, but I'm going to try and keep it a little bit more broadly focused and talk about the experience of being involved in a search. What happens when you get the call, what you're going to be provided, what you're going to have to do with it, and then how to go out and do it. So with that said, I'm going to put some slides up here, and nothing fancy, but it'll help keep me on track. So we should have.
Yeah, we can see them. Just go ahead and launch them.
Okay, I'm trying to get this to full screen. Where'd that go?
Bottom right, right next to the, yep, that way too, yep.
All right, did that go to full screen for you all? Here it is, maybe?
Not yet. Maybe a little bit.
Okay, better?
Yep. No, you have a dual screen, so we're seeing your notes on the right, Walter. You have to select.
Okay. That is presenter view. I don't really need that.
Okay, you selected another format. Go to end slide, and then go back out, and you should be able to at the bottom right. Oh, here you go.
There you go.
Got it.
Okay. Good. Okay. You can tell I put a lot of effort into the background for this.
Don't touch on nothing. It's okay.
Didn't want to detract from the content. So what we're going to do is talk about how to get ready for a search once you've been called out. And this part of it doesn't have a separate slide, so let's just jump right in and talk about the division of labor amongst the crew. We've got several things that need to be done while we're out there in order to do this successfully and safely. Obviously, somebody's got to be flying the plane, but on top of that, we have communications responsibilities back to the sector that is going to be holding our guard, whether they're the ones that generated the pattern or not. We have navigation responsibilities. Now, I'm talking more about maritime navigation and what's on the water underneath us rather than where to put the plane. The search route and the flying of that pattern is the responsibility of the guy or guys up front, but somebody's got to be aware of what is supposed to be underneath us while we're doing all this. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And I've used sector in lowercase here, meaning that before you get out there, depending on the crew and the aircraft, you want to have some sense of who's going to be looking where in order to provide the coverage that we're dependent on. We don't have electronic search capabilities, so we're not up there with look down radar and FLIR and all kinds of nifty C-130 gadgets. All we've got is however many eyeballs we've managed to load into the plane. So when you're doing your brief and you're getting ready, you want to go over all this stuff and make sure it's clear who's going to be handling what. If it's a two-man crew, that's a lot of work for two different people. If you've got room to carry more than that and payload, fuel, etc., take them. Because those extra eyes are not just extra eyes, but they're also an extra mind that can be handling some other aspect of the workload for the crew. Turn down the radio here. We're going to talk about how to get the pattern that you've been provided with loaded up in ForeFlight. There's two different ways to do that. One's a manual entry and the other one is an electronic import of it. And we'll talk about what to do during the mission in terms of knowing what should be underneath you, knowing where to look within the search box with extra interest. We'll talk about having some nautical charts displayed for somebody in the crew to be able to figure out what's supposed to be down there. And a couple of thoughts on talking with Sector during the mission. So when you get called out and Sector is going to produce a search pattern for you, what comes out of the computer on their end is a lot of information. And I'm going to have to switch over here, so I'm going to stop this share and we're going to bring up a text file with the raw output from a program called SAROPS, which is the search, I forget what it stands for, but it is the program that they run that allows them to do Monte Carlo simulation of where the target is likely to be. Does that make sense here? Let's look at this picture for starters. The examples I'm going to be using here are from a search for missing diver. This happened 2 weeks ago yesterday. The guy went missing in the Port Royal Sound area. He was diving for shark's teeth over here on the left side in the Broad River. Didn't come up, and the search started Tuesday evening, went all the way through Sunday evening before they called it. The search was unsuccessful, and this past Sunday the diver was found right here near that green object at the mouth of Port Royal Sound, a place called Bay Point Island. But the computer is going to run through this Monte Carlo simulation, which does multiple runs of things with varying elements like wind speed, current, wave conditions, and the various uncertainties of what the last known position was. So it produces what we call a heat map, which is a color-coded map that says within each square on the map, based on the color, this is the likelihood that the target will have ended up there. So when the search planner gets that output from the computer does not create the patterns for the planner. The planner looks at the probability distribution and comes up with a pattern that fits whatever part of the search hasn't been executed yet that is most likely to produce a find. In the earlier stages of the pattern or of the case, the search is going to be much closer to the last known position. And they iterate the search simulations each time they run a different set of environmental parameters, I guess, for lack of a better term. And if you look at the names for these patterns, you'll see here we have L-2 Station Charleston Visual. I think that means that they were up to Lima on the number of simulations that they had run in this case. So the first go around would have been Alpha, Bravo, et cetera, and ultimately 5 days into the search, they were at Lima, and that was the final go around for it. So the planner is going to take a look at this heat map and based on what kind of an asset he's coming up with a search pattern for, and what's already been done and who else is out there at a particular time. They'll try and deconflict the assets. They will try and cover the areas that are most likely to produce a result. And this is a template that they can adjust the parameters on, so the length of the search flags and the track spacing and the CSP are all manually selected, or rather as those parameters are defined, the planner can move this pattern around, and once they get what they like, in this case it was a parallel pattern starting offshore and creeping towards the beach. Once they get what they like, they'll save that and send it to us in the form of a file. Now, when that file shows up, it is just raw text, and hopefully you're seeing a text document now. Is anybody out there that can confirm?
No document.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Just you.
All right, Notepad.
It's coming up.
There it goes. You see it? Okay. So this is the sort of the line type or line printer output from the search pattern. Once they have come up with something that they like, that they want to have executed, this is what they will either cut and paste into an email or somehow get to you. So it's got the name of the case, the name of the pattern, the center of the pattern, and then according to the printout I've got next to my computer, you have 9 pages of stuff here that has been generated that are all related to, or either inputs to the search pattern or outputs from the calculations that are done on it. We've got the search object, we've got the SRU, which is the search rescue unit, which is whatever facility we're using for this. We've got sweep widths with weather correction factors. We've got transit speeds. We've got search speeds. We've got a line-by-line printout of the turning points, I guess, the waypoints for the pattern. So this is a lot of stuff, and we don't need it to get this thing input into our flight navigation device, whatever that may be. So let's take a look at this in a slightly different note. I'll go ahead and ask a question. Maybe you can answer back in the chat room here. What are some of the things that we would need to set up a search pattern? Just give me the names of the parameters. CSP, very good. What else? Now, Will, you're hogging it. I want to see somebody else check in here.
You say CSP?
Yes, that's already been put. You can click on the little box to see the chat stuff that's going on. CSP is what? Our commence search position, right?
Right.
That's where we're going to start the search. Not necessarily always the same thing as the datum, which is the most likely place for the object to be. In a Victor Sierra search, it is they are the same, but in a parallel search, they're not. CSP is not the center of the search box. It's not the
How about the direction of the first flag?
direction of the first leg. Excellent. Who was that?
Brad.
Okay. Number of legs, direction, length. Yep. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. We're going to pull.
There he goes. Leg length.
Hey, Susan, I'm on the call.
Somewhere. Leg length.
Okay. We've got some people claiming that they are not seeing the display on the screen.
There's none right now.
Distance between legs.
Okay.
Unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't recognize the voice, but I can hear you.
It's Brian.
Oh, hey, Brian.
Distance
Hey,
between legs. Distance
what I've
between
done
legs.
here is taken that last file. You guys are seeing a marked up version of that last file now, correct?
Yes.
All right. So going through this stuff, it's trying to correct all the SAR-ops grammar. So ignore all the blue stuff, but let's just look at the items on the right-hand column. CSP doesn't show up till about line 10 of this report, when in actuality that's the first thing that we have to find when we're building this pattern in ForeFlight. So you see over here CSP, and it's provided as latitude and longitude. Here's our first leg direction right below it. Search leg length, in this case 44.5 miles, nautical miles. Somebody mentioned direction of first turn. That's a big one, because if you fly the mirror image of what you're supposed to fly, you are creeping in the wrong direction and looking someplace where we're not supposed to be worried about. Track spacing is here. Here's one that tripped me up on this last case. The way that SAR-ops counts the number of legs, it includes the cross legs. So in our case, we had 7 big ones and 6 little ones for a total of 13. The little tool where you build the pattern in ForeFlight asks you specifically for how many legs, and it's only looking for the long legs. So when I first entered 13, it gave me a search pattern that went all the way back to I-95, and we were pretty sure that the diver was not over there. So a little bit of confusion, got that straightened out, and just remember not to take this number directly from SAR-ops and enter it. You want to make sure you're looking at just the number of search legs when you enter the stuff into ForeFlight. SRU, that is the official government 3-letter acronym for a facility, search and rescue unit. So in our case, we had a typo on this. It's supposed to be November 1021. That was Wilson's commander.
Popcorn.
That's the type of asset it is, what kind of sensors it's got on board, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's it in terms of markups that I did on this one. So we'll stop that share and talk a little bit about is there any confusion out there about how to enter a search pattern into ForeFlight? If you've got a particular question, go ahead and type it into the chat box, because there are a couple things that need to happen. When you get a new ForeFlight subscription or maybe load it onto a new device, you have to enable the SAR functions before it will give you the ability to select and build a pattern. So if you've got ForeFlight and you've never seen the kind of stuff that we're going to be looking at here, that might be one reason why. You have to go into settings, burrow around in there a little bit, and find the toggle switch that enables the search stuff. And all right, so having talked about what you're going to get from sector and what we need to do, directions are magnetic in this case. I think perhaps all cases, but it is labeled when you, I won't go back to that file, but if we look at the printout for direction of the first leg, actually it's a mix. The first leg direction was provided in both true and magnetic, as are, I think, all of the other compass directions or headings that are involved in a case like this. And one of the little data outputs that you'll see buried in the big file is what they are assuming the magnetic variation to be for the area in which you're operating. So in our case, it was 8 degrees west, and first leg was 057 true, or as we all know, 065 magnetic. Brad, it's good to see you back on the line here. Thank you for joining us. Brad's prior Coast Guard, so he knows this stuff. And let's see, where was I heading with this? Flip through my notes. So on the division of labor, we were in really great shape on this last mission because we had a crew of 4 experienced people and an aircraft very well suited for this type of work. So we were able to take the pilot stuff and give that to the pilots. We were able to take the air traffic control stuff, give that to the co-pilot. We were able to take one of the air crew who were flying in the back and commit them to Coast Guard comms, and the other air crew in the back was able to focus on navigation. With that basic division of labor, overlaid on top of the whole thing was the need to be looking out the windows at what was going by us and trying to find what we were looking for. We don't always have that kind of luxury. A 2-man crew flying in a small aircraft is going to have to figure out how to spread that stuff out between them, but it's an important thing to talk over and make sure that there's no confusion before you launch. My particular job during that flight was the maritime domain awareness, if you will, the business of knowing what was on the charts and what was supposed to be underneath us at any given time. I know a lot of folks fly with some sort of a iPad or tablet program that will display their position on a nautical chart. That's terrific. I don't have any particular preference in which one, as long as you've got something that will display what's underneath you on the nautical charts. And there is a way that we can do that in ForeFlight as well. But if you've got multiple people and multiple devices in the aircraft, and you can dedicate one to simply keeping track of what's down there or what's supposed to be down there, primarily in the form of buoys and other aids to navigation. We don't have a lot of oil platforms or windmills or small islands or anything like that cluttering up the ocean around here. But the detail you're going to get from a sectional chart in terms of what's supposed to be underneath you on the water is non-existent, right? You're going to be lucky if it shows you an island. It would have to be a pretty good size island even to show up on an FAA sectional. So if you haven't already figured out some way to have a nautical chart available to you when you're flying, you need to do that now while we're not flying, so that when you get back out there, we're ready to go. All right, time for another pop quiz. Where are you most likely to find somebody while you're flying around the ocean? Answers through the chat room, please. All right. That was not me clapping at an answer. That was me trying to clobber a fly. Greg Hammer says, clinging to a buoy. Anybody remember day in September last year, sandwiched between Hurricane Dorian and the Golden Ray? Had a case out at Grays Reef. I believe an EPIRB went off in the middle of the marine sanctuary out there, and one of the Savannah helos flew out, took a look, and what did they find? They found 4 people sitting on the buoy. Okay. Well, if I was out there swimming around with no boat and I saw a buoy, I'd probably give that a try. Swim over to that and hang on to it. So not only are buoys and floating objects one of the places that is most likely to have a survivor on it, and therefore one of the places that we really need to check, they are also good ways to confirm your ability to see stuff from the aircraft. In other words, whether there's somebody hanging on the buoy or not, if you know where it's supposed to be, you ought to be able to find it from whatever your search altitude is. So again, just another reason to have something in the aircraft that tells you what is supposed to be down there, so you can at least make sure. If you're, most of these patterns, you know, our searches are usually 25 miles in or less, and there's a lot of artificial reefs, state of South Carolina, state of Georgia, probably Florida. They're all throwing all kinds of stuff out there in the ocean to help make some structure for holding fish. And usually those things are marked with a PATON, private aid to navigation. Up here, they're mostly yellow, and if you get close enough into shore, you'll start seeing lateral marks as well, reds and greens. The channel entrance buoys that mark the beginning of a channel into a harbor, those are usually safe water marks, so those are big white and red striped buoys. Find out where those things are supposed to be and keep an eye on them as you're flying your pattern, and make sure that you can see them where they're supposed to be. Because if you can't find a buoy that's more than likely right where it's supposed to be, what are the chances you're going to find something the size of a coconut bobbing around in the middle of several hundred miles or square miles of search box? Okay. Sector communications. One of the things that I've found to be useful in the past is if you've got some time en route to the search pattern, or at least you might be in the box before you actually start the pattern. 2 weeks ago, the search box actually extended virtually right up to the field that we launched from, and so we spent the entire time in the box, although we flew to the opposite corner of it to start the pattern. You can talk to your watchstander, particularly if you're a small crew. If you just got 2 people flying and one of them has got to look down and pick the numbers off of a navigation device to provide that position report, see if the watchstander is willing to accept your just telling him which leg of the pattern you're on as a position report, rather than diverting those eyeballs from the search down to some device or to the dashboard to pull latitude and longitude off there. If they are, you just let them know, call them and say, hey, we're November 1021 starting leg 4. And that's something you can do without taking your eyes off of the search. So I think we're getting close to the point where I want to kick it over to Joe. We've been working on the ability to do a demo in ForeFlight. Those of you that got the original invite for this class, I attached a couple of files to it. You'll find our pattern in the search area from May the 3rd, which was a week ago Sunday. This was the diver search. We ended up doing the last search of that case, and as soon as we landed and called in with negative results, they suspended the case, and it took another week for the man to be found. I attached 2 files to the invite. You should be able to find them, and in addition to the 2 files, there's a link to a YouTube video that shows you how to import those into ForeFlight. So I'll segue over to Joe if he's ready to assume the presentation responsibilities here. But in the course of doing that, David, do we have share enabled for all participants?
Yes.
Okay. I think I am not sharing now, so Joe should be able to go ahead and share. In the meantime, while he's setting that up, I'll explain that the 2 files, one of them contains a graphic of the search box and the route of the pattern. The other, that is a KML file, which is something that you could use in Google Earth or several other mapping applications. The other file is a format that ends in .crd. I have no idea what that stands for, but that is a route file that can be imported into ForeFlight and will show up in your flight planning log and also be uploadable for those of you that have FlightStream or some equivalent ability to pass a route from ForeFlight up to your autopilot. Okay, Joe, take it away.
All right, thanks, Walter. Can everybody see my ForeFlight screen now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So there's a couple of different things here to go through. One is that if you look at the email that Walter showed, and for the CSP, the coordinates come out in degrees and decibel minutes and seconds. So that comes out as a 30, like let's just say it's a latitude 30, it comes out 30 dash and then a 58.705. So ForeFlight doesn't like the dash, but it will read a space. So when you're typing in the data to put something into the a waypoint for the CSP, then you're going to want to look at that and say, oh, it says 30 dash, I need to put 30 space, and then continue on 58.705 north. Also, it'll show as a comma space in between the longitude, the latitude and the longitude, and you're going to want to disregard that, just put a slant after the N for north, and then your 3-digit 078 space, whatever the rest of it, 31.992. It's very important to remember that. If not, then the CSP is not going to go in the way you want it to when you're manually entering the information. So to move right on with that, I'm going to go back to that information and show you that right about here, CSP, and I can't point it out, but if you look just to the right of that, the gray area is 31-58704, 705, and 080. So we don't want, if you're going to plan on copy pasting that in there, you're going to have to be able to get rid of some of that stuff. So the best thing to do is just write it down on a scrap of paper the way it needs to go in there. So 31 space 58.705 north slant 080 space 17.994 west. Going back to the ForeFlight, you're down here in the more, down on the lower right is the more button, and then that'll take you to custom content. You click on that. Okay, so where do I go? Okay, back, and that'll come up like that. And if you want to put in a user waypoint, then the best thing to do is to name it something like CSP and then May 3rd or whatever. So you'll know that, hey, these are things that later on can be gotten rid of. So I'm going to bring this up, and you can see that this information, when I put it in, that converted it correctly, 31, 30.50, 07945. But again, that information was put in there using 31 space 30.50 north, 79 space 45.10 west, and that gives you your the CSP you're going to use. And if you also want to see that on the map, you just hit map, and you can see that automatically shows you on the map where that CSP. This is not a good CSP. It was just a demonstration and of how that works. So backing out of that, we're now going to say this is a manual way of putting in a procedure. So up at the right-hand side, top right is procedure. And you get to that, you'll notice that the FPL is lit. If you click FPL, that goes away. FPL, it comes up. You hit procedure, search and rescue. And so I've already put this information in here. So you say, you're going to click the pattern that you want. I want a parallel pattern. What waypoint is your, basically your CSP? It's the one I named Joe. You would say a CSP May 3rd or whatever. And then the information from the email is that Walter already showed you. The initial desired track in degrees true. So it's in there as magnetic and true. Enter the 057. It tells you that the initial turn is left, that the leg lengths are 44.5, the spacing is 4 miles, and the number of legs. Now here's where we're at, 7. So remember, the Coast Guard counts the cross legs. So you got 1 and a cross leg for 2, back for 3, et cetera, et cetera. So they ended up with 13 legs when we don't, ForeFlight does not count the cross legs. So if you look at that, to do that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So what is it? I think the key that you got to look at is the Coast Guard number plus 1 divided by 2. So the Coast Guard number was 13, plus 1's 14, divided by 2 is 7. That's what you want to put in there for the number of legs. Okay? And when you click out of that, if it says add to route, you know you've got all the information laid out that you need. So you say add to route, and you can see that it gives you the coordinates for all the endpoints. And if you open it up a little bit, it'll actually give you the coordinates of all the points where you turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right. So you've got close. So you can see up here in the flight plan, you've got SAR parallel. It's already been put in there for you. Okay. Now again, disregard that. Again, this is using that CSP of Joe, which was sort of a test waypoint, but the pattern that was put in there was the same pattern that we used for the missing diver. And that's how you would put in a manual one and then you can track that, because the little airplane, I need to be able to move this thing without drawing on it. The little airplane that comes up here to show you your actual position. When it's flying around out here, it'll show you, and the airplane will turn in and start flying these tracks. And this is for the people that are running comms. They'll say, okay, I'm completing leg 1. Well, now you and the sector have got to come up to an agreement about how many legs is there, because if you're on leg 1, you say, and then you turn left and turn left again, and now you're on your leg 2, you're actually on his leg 3. So you gotta, there has to be a coordination there. There's probably something that needs to be more codified between us and sector about how that works. Maybe just a chart, or just a graphic that they can just look at and say, oh yeah, here's my thing, here's all the leg numbers, and it's how we're going to work that. Okay, so that in a nutshell is how you put together in ForeFlight a manual entry of a search pattern. One of the things I want to show you that Walter brought up, again, on the More button, you go down to settings. For you, the people that aren't seeing the SAR stuff, settings, you run down here to checklist, rates, search and rescue, and you'll notice SAR features is on, SAR waypoints as lat long is on, and that will give you that information that you need under procedures, search and rescue, and then show you all the different patterns that can be entered. Going back to here, so I'm going to clear this out, and we're going to show you how to put the information in. I know there's a way to get rid of that line there, but I haven't seen it. Oh, there you go. Clear. How about that? Fine job. So now you saw that there was 2 files attached that Walter sent you. One of them's a .crd file. The other one's a .kml file. We're working out the issue, but right now when sector sends out that information, they sent the CRD file, it comes out as the file name, open paren, CRD, close paren, .txt. Well, that makes it easy for us to read what's in that XML file, but it's not what ForeFlight needs, okay? So if you're in the position where you receive that file and it's ending in .txt, you need to know, either on your iPad or tablet, on your desktop computer or whatever, that you need to download that file someplace where you can get to it and change the file extension and get rid of the .txt, get rid of the parentheses around CRD, and make the file extension say .crd. Okay? We don't really have a good way of doing that. We're talking to sector about how they can send that to us in that format without having us to do anything. But as of right now, when you get it as a file name, parentheses, CRD, close parentheses, .txt, you're going to have to rename it so that it's a .crd. It's really tough to do on an iPad because it does not, by default, show you what the extension is. And even if you go into info for the file in files or whatever on an iPad, it'll tell you what that .txt extension is on there, but it won't let you change it. So you have to download a third-party file manager, whatever your favorite is, and then work it that way. So I just won't go into all those details, but it is important that you know that you have to change that file name. The KLM file is fine by itself. All right, so now I'm going to go. How come that thing? I need to make it so it doesn't. There we go. Where am I? Hey, I'm getting tired of it doing the. Okay, moving on. So I'm going to go back here to my email, and you'll notice that this is where the files are, and I'll show you real quickly what I'm talking about with the file names. This one down here, down at the bottom, it says parentheses CRD parentheses .txt. That's the one you got to change to where it's visual.crd. Right? The other one's a KLM file. You really can't see the extension, but this is how it works on an iPad. If you kick that, and it's not going to show you anything because it can't read that file. But up in the upper right-hand corner, you have a upload thing, and you do that, and then you slide over here and copy to ForeFlight. Okay, this is assuming you have ForeFlight installed and the licensing and all that stuff. So you say, I want to copy that to ForeFlight, and it's custom content, and you want to put it on your custom map layers, and it says import success, and you say okay. Then I go back here to custom map layers, and I say I want to see that. And there, if you'll look now, you'll see that there are some lines there with a box all the way around the pattern, and that is the search box, definition thereof, search box. In the lower left, you'll see CSP. It automatically designates the CSP because it came out of that file. That's where the search pattern would start. And then you can see that just inside the search box, there's the first leg, turn to the left, second leg, and so on. And there's also the name of the search pattern is put on there, and it is the center of the search box. If that's necessary to be known or whatever, you can actually just click on that information, and it'll tell you what the coordinates are, bearing to from it, your current location, and things like that. Okay, so that's all fine and dandy. And in fact, for somebody who's just following the track of the airplane, probably just fine. Okay, because the track of the airplane is still going to come out. It's still going to go to the CSP, and then they're going to start flying this route. Easy to see. But for the pilots, it's usually better to have something that shows the current leg, what all the other legs are. And nowadays, the ForeFlight will actually, using Bluetooth, you can put the path in there and just tell it, hey, load it to my navigators, Garmin 400, 430s, 530s, multiple others. And then they don't have to punch all that into another navigator. So to do that, what you're going to do is go down here to, you're going to go find the renamed CRD file. So for me, I've renamed it and it's in my files. Okay. In fact, I've already got it up there. You can see it. It's renamed. This is what it looks like here. If you look at that CRD file, the way it comes out as a text, it's a bunch of XML data. Okay. Can't do nothing with that. But once you've changed the file name, then the system can't see what's in there because it's not recognized, but the information is there. So it comes up and it says, well, I got this file and it's 11 KB, it's a CRD file. And I say, fine, that's exactly what we want. So again, you hit the upload in the upper right hand corner, which is the square with the arrow up. You swing across here to the copy to ForeFlight, okay? And that puts all that information right there in the flight plan. And look, all of a sudden the first leg is purple, the rest of the legs are blue. All the information is just like we showed before, is all now, and it's overlaying the KLM file. So you still see the search box going around the outside, okay? And you know, now you can go right here and you say, okay, we're going to be taking off. Insert before that, I want to put KJZI, which is Charleston Executive. And then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say insert after this one here. And I want to go back to KJZI. Okay, insert. And there you go. So from KJZI, we're going to fly that track out to the CSP, maneuver to get into the right lineup. Then we're going to fly the whole pattern. And look, we're almost right back at KJZI when the pattern's done. Now, there is also a nav log. Okay, if you look under where I moved here, right at the below the fight pan there under reverse and clear, you got edit and you got nav log. All that information is in this nav log, ready to go. So when you take off and you start flying, it knows when it hits all those points, and it's going to start giving you information here that says how long did it take to fly it, how much remaining, and information like that. So it's good information to have if somebody asked you about, hey, how much longer you got it to go or whatever. Walter, am I missing anything?
No, I don't think so. The one thing I would ask is, let me get the right number here. And we'll put this towards the end of the show if anybody wants a refresher on it. But I think you have some charts loaded up in there.
Oh, I do. I do.
So what we're looking at here is the sectional, and as I vamp for time, I'm trying to.
I'll bring one up.
Call the 11480 would be good. There's probably a better one.
114. I don't have that. I got 88.
All right, hold on a second, and I'll find something good here.
Basically, what we're trying to show is that those maps that Walter sent out along instructions on how to download them and put them into ForeFlight before actually will show up on here. Okay, and if I get one that's down here, I have no idea what's to the south. Well, there's one. See, it's underneath the flight pattern now, and so those nautical charts, see, they're showing. Here's the entry into the harbor for Charleston.
Hey Joe, could you zoom that a little bit and show us some pitons there? Zoom in towards the cross legs. Let's see if we can find a buoy or some sort of a mark.
I think there was ones down. Well, I don't think I have that map in here. Let me see if I can give you another map. Seems a little bit.
Pull the drop down for the chart layers, and let me see if I can find one there that would be good. I can't see the screen right now. Do you have 1140480?
No, I got 11488.
How about 11009?
No, man.
Oh well,
That's not
you know what? It doesn't. Just pull up whichever one you've got. It doesn't have to be in the search box.
Let's look at this one. Yeah, this is a little bit better. This is right off the coast. And I can.
Oh yeah, that's it.
This one here. No, this one here.
Yep, that's good.
So anyhow, you can see the little red. This is what you're looking at here.
Yeah, there we go.
So go ahead and explain.
Oh, okay. Well, we're in pretty close to shore here, so you're seeing lateral marks. These are you've got right in the center, a little bit north of the middle. You've got a lighted yellow buoy, so that's a piton probably marking a fishing spot. I think we have, I can't read it, but to the southwest of that, you've got a nun buoy with a red marker on it.
Mm-hmm.
So these are things that you can use to calibrate your effectiveness. If you're flying around and you've got somebody that can keep an eye on this stuff and say, look, there's a buoy coming up 3 miles, should be passing on the left side of the aircraft. That's a good way to make sure that you're able to spot stuff that's down there.
It is a very big issue. I mean, we were out there for hours and didn't see anything except boats, ships, and center console fishers. And you sort of like, okay, just how small is a person in a black wetsuit with orange tanks going to look to me? I couldn't calibrate my eye. And we looked for a lot of these things until we finally found one and realized that, even at 1,000 feet, at 100 knots, it's your brain doesn't really know what you're looking for until you can get it calibrated as to something that size.
Seems to me like this might be a good thing to practice while you're out flying around on a mom.
Exactly.
Okay. If there's any questions, throw them in the chat room or unmute yourself and launch.
Yeah.
This is not the easiest stuff to do, but the value associated with it is pretty significant. So I'd like to hear what folks' reactions are. Kevin Wilcox is asking why were we at 1,000 feet instead of 500. We had a 4-mile track spacing on this. The pattern was put together as the final last-ditch effort to search the entire area. And in order to do that, they put us at 1,000 feet and gave us a fairly wide track spacing. Given the duty day that we had available, the aircraft had to come down from North Carolina. So the pilot's duty day started before he launched. He had an hour flight to get to Charleston to pick up crew. We briefed for an hour or so, and then it was a 3.5 hour actual search time. The whole flight was in the box, as you've seen from the display that Joe did, and they purposely put the CSP at the far corner of the box so that we would be flying through. Yeah, there's JZI. So really, once we were feet wet coming out of that coastal airport, we were on the case and searching on the way to the CSP, and then worked the parallel pattern on the way back. I'll just throw this in there since we're talking about parallel patterns. If for some reason they ever give you a creep pattern, which is a parallel pattern that happens to be wider than it is high, do not try and enter that in ForeFlight using the creep search type. You want to set that up as a parallel pattern. There's a little glitch with how the creep pattern was programmed, and it does not match the Coast Guard procedure generation. So just set it up as a parallel, and you'll be fine. Let's see. We have, oh, okay. Where do we get the nautical charts? That is a feature in ForeFlight that is, we wrote this up and sent it out to everybody probably a year or so ago. There was a really dreadful way of importing those map tiles previously, and they've cleaned it up such that you just suck them straight out of the NOAA computer now. It's a little bit involved to try and talk through, which is me covering for the fact that I don't remember myself exactly how to do it. So what I will do is find the directions that I wrote up a year or so ago and email those back out to everybody that was on the invite. But basically, you're using something called a map tile or an MB tile format chart. And it's a nautical chart with all the gunk clipped off the edges and prepared for quilting, so that if you notice, Joe, if you could zoom in on the border between the sectional and the nautical chart, you won't see the latitude and longitude scales that would normally be there on a nautical chart. It's just going to be a clean break, correctly positioned with the sectional.
I will bring up, Walter, that there's some stuff going up on in the front of the airplane that people in the back are usually aware of as the information is coordinated. But when first of all, we were having to go out beyond 25 or 30 miles to do this. And so we had a twin engine airplane to make that all nice and legal. But for those of you that may not know, if you look right where it says Tybee anchor, and then, just to the right of that little triangle there, to the right, there's a little red dotted line or multi-dotted line. You follow that on down, it's the contiguous US ADIZ, okay? In other words, do not cross that line inbound or we will shoot you down if we don't know who you are. Okay, there's that. And then there's also, if you'll notice to the right of the first leg says warning area, warning 138. That's a restricted area. And then inboard of that, right above the midpoint there, the line coming out goes right, is warning 137A. So the pilots are responsible for getting a hold of the proper air traffic control facilities that lets them know to find out, are those areas active? As it turned out, they knew we were out there searching, and they had already reserved 5,000 and below in 137 and 138 for those activities, which was great, but you don't know until you call. And usually the best thing to do is call them directly. So when you call them up on the radio, they know who you are, what you're doing, and it's not a big deal. The ADIZ is a separate situation. You have to call a separate functionality to let them know what's going on and what either get an assigned transponder code so they know who you are, that you're going to be crossing back and forth that ADIZ, and they can keep an eye on you without launching some F-18s at you. And then you clear with them once you're out of there. Same thing with the warning areas. So in this kind of a scenario, you're going to be involved in making, watching the pilot or the co-pilot make these phone calls, in addition to calling sector, filing flight plans, calling the air station, and make sure that they know that what we're going to do, and on and on. So there's a lot of coordination going on, especially along these coastal areas offshore, and it's just something that I'm sure that Anne Marie can tell you that there was a lot of phone calls going on trying to make sure that we were all coordinated, ready to go. Over. Back to you, Walter.
Okay. Bill Ballard had a question about altitude on this, and I know that Bob Hasty flew on a busier day than we did on this same case. So, Bob, if you're out there and you're willing to jump in and talk about altitudes and deconfliction, we'd love to hear it. Nothing heard.
Hey, Walter,
Bob, is that you?
this is Will. I'll chime in on it a little bit.
Okay.
So Bill had a question, what is the standard altitude? The altitude is given in the search pattern, and that's part of the formula on the leg length and the space, part of their calculations on what you should be able to see. But the other thing that comes into play there is if there are multiple assets in the then the sector will usually try to deconflict that by stacking you at different altitudes. So by policy, we have a hard deck of 500 feet that we're not going to go below. And that's usually where they keep the helicopter down lower. And then some of the other search assets, if it's a CBP plane with a look down radar and stuff like that, they can obviously work higher. So our standard training altitude's 1,000 feet. We have a hard deck of 500. But I guess as with all answers in these searches, it comes into it depends, Bill, on are you the only one out there, or are the aircraft stacked at different altitudes to deconflict? Walter, you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Walter, Bob Hesey.
Oh, hey, Bob. How are you?
I went horse trucking on a muted mic. Our first pattern out there for the search was a track line. We flew that at 500, and that was coordinated with sector, talking about altitude before we launched. The second pattern was a parallel. We flew that at 800 because there was a C-130 that wanted to fly it at 300. And we had a little bit of overlap in the patterns. So we worked it out, coordinated in the air, and that was it.
Okay, I think Will's point is germane here in that when they're doing the probability of success calculations, which is one of the things that the big computer, the big SAROPS server, wherever that is, takes into account, the same facility with the same crew and the same sensor set has got different sweep widths is the number that they use in search planning. And that's, if I remember the math correctly, it's the sweep width is for a given facility, it's the distance at which the odds of missing something closer than that width are equal to the odds of seeing something that is outside that width. And it seems a little arbitrary, but it makes the math work out in such a way that you can figure out for, let's say, a vessel on the surface in certain sea conditions with a FLIR has a certain sweep width associated with it. And that's one of the things that they use to figure out what the track width should be. Now, in our case, we were asked how much search time we had available, so we gave them a number. They figured out the size of the box that the target was likely to be in and gave us a pattern that worked in order to complete our duty day. And in our case, the pilot was bagged by the time we were done with the pattern, so he had to stay on the ground here in town that night. But there's a lot that goes into it, and I guess this is where we segue into the commercial for taking the search coordination and execution class. It's usually offered, I think, once per year per sector, so get hold of your OXLOs and try and make sure that you can get your aircraft commanders, your air crew, your pilots, etc., into that. when it comes around. There's an auxiliary version of it, or rather there are auxiliary that are qualified to teach it, and the National Search and Rescue School at Yorktown comes around with a traveling roadshow, or at least they used to. I don't know when that will be back in action. So if I can find another instructor, I'd be happy to try and put one on here, but it requires 2 people that are specifically qualified to teach that class, and there are no other people in my division that have the qualification, so I haven't actually not taught it. Theoretically, I'm qualified. I'd feel comfortable if I could get hold of the course materials, but you have to have a class lined up. You have to get like numbered tests and stuff. It's kind of a pain in the neck. But if we can make that happen, maybe Savannah would be a good place to put it on sometime. All right, we're at 1 hour and 15 minutes. I was thinking 1 hour and 30 for this. Do we have any other questions? Okay, we had one question that came in through the chat line on getting the sector command center to send you these files. In our case, we asked for them, and the guy on duty that day had worked with them before, so he was able to generate them and send them down. We did not do the direct import, mainly because of the issue with that file name. So we built the pattern by hand and in 4Flight, I guess the manual method that Joe demonstrated a little while ago. But the way forward for the Coast Guard is upgrade electronics on the boats that would be able to receive one of these things much the same way as our iPads. So now that involves electronics installation on hundreds and hundreds of response boats and other small assets. In our case, we've already got the software. We just need to make sure we know how to use it and make sure that the sectors can send it to us when we need it. I guess including even the ability to receive it in flight if we were within some sort of Wi-Fi coverage and the device in question had email capability. Mine does not, so that's I do a lot better on the ground than I do in the air. Where is our U-boat? Which U-boat is this?
Any.
Well, I was up in New Jersey when they found a U-boat that nobody knew was out there, and it took several years to identify it, and in the meantime it was just known as Yoo-hoo. It did finally get in there and pull out some serialized parts, and were able to trace it to a boat that they thought had been sunk off of Gibraltar. That's about all I got on U-boats. Oh wait, the Hunley? The Hunley was just outside the search box that you saw here. Oh, I do have something else I can share. Let's take a look at this.
Walter, before people forget, just to make sure they put their first name, last name, and ID number into the chat area if they came in later, to see if we can get them credit for training.
Yeah, I'm not sure what kind of credit we could get, but we can talk well about this. Maybe call it an aviation workshop or something like that. What you're looking at right now is a piece of navigation software that I fiddle around with some, and this busy stuff up here is Charleston Harbor. Those are some ship targets that we picked up, but the route that you're seeing there is our route our track from the flight on the 3rd of May. And that arrow beacon, if you zoom in close enough, you can see us taxiing out. Literally the runway 22 put us on path. We flew over Christoph's house, and then we were in the box right off the beach. So that first the transit to CSP was this diagonal line, and then came around, lined up on CSP, and started the first search leg right around here. So you could see as we came up, we were passing over some marks, but we were having trouble finding them. These are artificial reef buoys, little yellow things from the air, but you get up next to them and they're 6 feet across and 8 feet high. It's hard to believe that you'd have a hard time seeing them from 1,000 feet, but we took a little loop to double back and check on these buoys. Came up here, that's our first cross leg, and then we were just mowing the lawn. Pretty typical to get for a parallel pattern covering a large area to start offshore and creep in towards the beach, which is what they had us do here. Our final leg, we flew up over the jetties, turned around and dropped right back down into JZI. So I don't have the chat window up. Were there any other questions? All right, well, let's see. I guess we can leave this open for a little bit. For anybody that did not sign in, please do so through the
5-0.
chat window. We get a recording, we get a text log file back from Zoom after that. Does not contain private messages, just the ones that were sent out to everybody. So I got nothing better to do. I'm going to sit here and hang out in case anybody's got anything else they care to share. We've got a general AUXAIR meeting going on.
The message, Walter, is for flight only available for iPads from a message from Marvin.
I do not know. I think it was developed for iPad. I've got it working on an iPhone, although it's too small to be much good. Anybody else using it on an Android tablet or some other device? There is a ForeFlight web. If you have a ForeFlight account, they have a website where you can do some stuff, but it doesn't seem terribly useful for the search work and route planning.
Yeah, Walter, last year when I was looking at it to get it, I had an Android, and it just was not available. But if you go to their website, they take you through all the pros and cons of what size of iPad and things like that. But yeah, it was, if you really want to use ForeFlight, it's an iPad really oriented thing. I do notice that most of the pilots that are running ForeFlight in the airplane, they have iPad minis, and it seems to work really, really well.
Yeah, I have an iPad 2, and one of the reasons that I asked Joe to do the demo on this, not only is he a pilot and better at this stuff than I am, but my ForeFlight version is frozen in time, and I don't have the ability to suck in those files that we were playing with. So Joe had to do that. And I guess iPads automatically update apps, but if you're having trouble with this, do a version check and make sure you've got the latest version of ForeFlight running on your device. Let's see, Bob Hasty says that the policy and training manuals tell us to report the leg and the pattern vice coordinates. All right, that makes sense. Sectors at various SAR conferences have asked us to continue passing coordinates, which is counterproductive to the reason that we're out there. So that's a fight I'm willing to keep fighting. Will, do you have anything you want to share with Savannah or AUXAIR in general, whoever may be on the line?
Yeah, I'll, I guess, just reiterate what I put out in the newsletter today. We just got that guidance on how to electronically deliver the workshop, so we're going to start planning that and figure out what we can do and get that in the CRM refresher out. There's only a couple people that can do the CRM refresher, and if you noted in there, we have to limit that class size to 30 people, so we'll probably be staggering out several different ones to get that training out. I guess also back specifically to this, I would just encourage everybody to think about what Walter said earlier in there about incorporate this into your regular mom patrols. This is another one of those perishable skills that if you're not doing all the time, it's real easy to kind of lose the switchology on your iPad there, how to upload these things, actually go out and fly them. And then this may be another topic, but also there's a drill that Bob Hasty teaches where if you're in one of these patterns and you think you see something, how to take this parallel search and turn it into a sector search. That's another really good drill that I think could be incorporated into just regular mom patrol from Savannah up to Myrtle Beach and back. So we're going to be trying to work on, if you want to say, some curriculum to maybe formalize this a little bit. But in the meantime, the more you can do on your own, I think the better off you'll be with this. That's it.
Thanks, Will. We had one question about the availability of a recording for this. And yes, we are recording, and yes, it will be available. AUXAIR Savannah has a YouTube channel. We'll put it on that channel once we get the, it takes a couple of steps to get the file ready to publish like that, but we'll probably have it out there tomorrow. And I'll send that link to Will, and maybe I can go in the next weekly report. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, thank you all for your time tonight. I hope everybody's doing